Well, Andrew Tate joins me again now. Andrew, good to see you.
Salam alaikum, Piers.
Good to see you. I've genuinely been amazed by the reaction I've had in the streets. Not just here, but I went to Qatar for the World Cup, had the same thing there. A lot of people coming up about Cristiano Ronaldo, obviously, but also a lot of people coming up about you. And they were almost exclusively men, young men, who genuinely see you as a role model, as somebody who inspires them, as somebody they want to be like.
Yep.
So that made me think, the first interview you had was quite combative, the second time a shorter interview less so. I want to try and work out in this one who you are, because it struck me as extraordinary that Google this week revealed some stats for the year. The #1 person whose name followed people Google searching who is in 2022 was Andrew Tate.
Yeah, that's quite remarkable. I think there's a whole swath of the population, especially young men, that feel disenfranchised. They feel disenfranchised with the media machine and the things they're supposed to believe. They don't feel an affinity with the educational systems or the culture. And they look at a person like me who stands up and says the things that many young men think. I haven't put a magic spell on the world. The fact that people like what I say means that they agree with me deep inside. They may be afraid to say it themselves, but I am seen as a bastion of free speech and a bastion for masculinity as a whole, because a lot of men are largely forgotten about.
Do you think you're a force for good, or are you a force in evolution where perhaps you've done and said stuff you shouldn't have done, and as you get older, perhaps as you get bigger, more followed around the world, you sense a responsibility perhaps you didn't have early on?
Well, we all evolve. Every human evolves day by day. You wouldn't be human if you didn't evolve on an hour-by-hour basis. But I do not think I'm a force for good. I absolutely not really know I'm a force for good, because I'm a force for truth. And truth is a good thing. Without truth, we're going to end up in absolute tyranny and slavery, and we're already on our way there. I feel like we're starting to combat it. My cancellation was the beginning of a change in public consciousness. Elon having Twitter is another beginning of the change in public consciousness. And anybody who stands up and speaks what they truly believe, even if it's something I don't personally agree with, I think that truth is absolutely important. And people's personal truths and people's personal opinions, even on differing sides of the same opinion, should be heard.
Tell me about your life. You were born to a mixed race couple. Your father was an African-American, a chess player.
Yeah.
And your mother, she was from this country.
Correct, yeah. So my father was black chess player. He was in the Air Force. He met my mother here in England. And then I was raised initially in the United States. And then I moved to Luton, England when I was younger. So I've moved around a lot. I've lived an eclectic life in many different scenarios. We've moved around. I've done a lot of different things, lived a lot of different experiences. And
what
I'm thankful for
nationality
it.
are you? I mean, what do you identify as?
I consider myself British now, but I will say that part of me, the patriotic Brit inside of me, is devastated by the state of the UK currently, and I want to make that very clear. The patriotic Brit in me truly loves this country, and seeing what's happening to it, especially to our major cities, is almost heartbreaking to watch in real time.
In what way?
It's falling apart. This is a failed society. By every metric you can possibly measure, it is absolutely and utterly failing. The cost of living crisis, the crime rates, everything is falling apart. If you compare it to a country like the United Arab Emirates, you compare it to a city like Dubai, London, which should be the greatest city on earth, is failing in absolutely every metric because our leadership is a joke. If you look at Dubai and the UAE, the leadership there is so flawless, so genuinely genius. They saw ahead and have built almost a utopia. And then you look at London, you can't even walk around with a watch on. It's disgusting.
You know, it's very interesting. I was in Qatar for the World Cup. Obviously, a lot of people in England taking a very censorious moral view about the World Cup being in the Middle East at all, because of their laws against homosexuality, because of their treatment of migrant workers. I've got to say, not that I don't share the concerns about those things, of course I do, but I found a lot of the virtue signalling, and I think that's what it was in many cases, about the whole region, actually quite distasteful. Because when I was in Qatar, I thought the World Cup was fantastically well run, incredibly good experience. But a lot of Qataris were saying to me, you know, there's this weird, quaint feeling back in your country that we all want to aspire to behave like that we all want to live in a country with massive drug problems, with massive knife crime issues, with scenes like the European Championships final where it's complete lawlessness going on, where stuff like the NHS, the system of healthcare, is basically collapsing, where the education system is dropping behind, so on and so on and so on. And it's a really interesting perspective. They were like, I know you all think that we want to have your form of democracy and your form of life, but actually we're fine, thanks.
Absolutely, because it's a failed society and it's godless. I think it's disgusting. We leave our old people to rot in old people's homes, and then we sit there and say we don't have enough money for nurses. I understand this nurse strike very well and how frustrating it can be if you walk into a hospital and the nurse is not prepared to work. But the nurses would be prepared to work at the current wage if they believed this country was spending its money prudently. When you see this country spending its money and just absolutely wasting it, pulling out of thin air to fund proxy wars, God knows where, that has nothing to do with them. Of course, as a nurse, you're going to stand up and say, well, can't I get a pay rise? This country has failed on every metric. And especially our major cities. I've just come to London now. I made it very clear to my private jet pilot. I said, fuel the jet and leave it running, because the second I'm finished talking to Piers, I'm leaving this cesspit. It's disgusting. This country, and London as a whole, 10 years ago, was one of the most hospitable cities on earth. Now you cannot walk around safely with a watch on. Good. Self-belief is important.
I do believe myself, but this has not gone well. You're quite good at chess, I'll give you that.
Yeah, well, in the chessboard of life, I've done pretty good. I've done okay. Check.
The question is, can you beat me in time? You've only got 50 seconds.
Check. Well, that's interesting.
Yeah, I don't think you can.
Let's see. Mate in 2, Piers. Yeah, you can have that. Doesn't matter. It's mate in 2. Check. Mate. Good. Good game, sir.
Well played.
Thank you.
25 seconds away from safety. OK, well, Andrew Tate, I'll give you something. You're good at chess.
Thank you.
You have to be. You just beat me.
I know you're a internationally renowned
What has
player.
chess taught you about life, quickly?
I can teach you a lot of things. Like I said about the queen being able to run around the board, the king having to move a square at a time, about the fact you need to think ahead, absolutely everything is your fault. But there is a saying, which is actually one of my favorite sayings in the world. It said, a well-played game of chess is a sign of a gentleman, but an expertly played game of chess is the sign of a wasted life.
He's not your idea of a role model.
Well, no, he's not. I see him as a symptom of a problem rather than a solution to it. I can understand why.
What's the problem that he's the symptom
The
for?
problem is that I think a lot of young men feel that nobody is speaking up for them. In a culture where we are encouraged to have identity politics, the only identity that isn't a good identity is a young man or a young white male. He talks in a very straight way and he gives straight answers to some questions, which I think he gives very wrong answers to. But I find him repellent. I think he talks about... He basically creates straw men that he destroys. So he will depict feminism as a particular kind of thing, a kind of man-hating thing, which it isn't.
Well, it is to some feminists.
For a small number of feminists,
I mean, there are some radical feminists who genuinely hate men.
There definitely are. But most people know that feminism is about just thinking that everyone should have equal opportunities regardless of...
Yeah, and one thing...
He was using that to kind of attack the more extreme forms of feminism that says, you know, women can do anything a man can do. And he was using that as an example. Yeah. But I do think, you know, you lose people when you refuse to outright condemn sort of 10th century barbarians like this. But I don't think... When he said it has nothing to do with him, I think he's not willing to get into dicey territory in that way. But it's like you speak in such absolute terms. Why not?
Do you think he's a misogynist?
I don't think he's a misogynist. No, I don't think so.
I mean, a misogynist means somebody who hates women.
Yeah,
I don't think he hates women.
I do think he hates women. I think he thinks women are nothing. I think he would not know what to do with you and I, Esther, because he does not know how to deal. He gives interviews to people like you or to Hugo Rifkin. He'll give interviews to men.
But a lot of women I've spoken to about... Yeah, but a lot of women...
But he's done interviews with women. I've seen them before on YouTube.
Yeah,
and he's very polite and respectful.
Yeah, women do. A lot of women do like him.
Exactly.
There are a lot of women who don't know him who seem to hate him, ironically. But I'm not sure it's as clear-cut as he's a misogynist.
I don't think he's a misogynist, and I have a brother who's probably within his target demographic, 23, and I can understand why his message would resonate with him, because it's normal. It's normal, exactly, for young men to feel like they don't have a place in Western society, and he actually makes that point. I just think when you don't want to outright condemn 10th century barbarians like the Taliban, you tend to lose your case with more moderate people. But again, we're not his target audience.
The fact that his understanding about what's happening in Afghanistan is that it's a feminist issue rather than a human issue.
I don't think he said that.
Well, no, he did. He said, send this feminists in. It's a human issue where we made all these promises to people in Afghanistan and then we left.
Well, let's be clear. We betrayed those women.
We absolutely betrayed Biden.
Joe
As a human being,
in the way we pulled out of Afghanistan overnight, and we betrayed not only people who work with us, the interpreters and so on,
but people
we
who
have left
died
millions of Afghan women have just been tossed back to these barbaric wolves. Well, Harry and Meghan have demanded a royal apology for the claims made in their Netflix documentary. The 6-hour wine-a-thon launched blistering attacks on Britain and the British monarchy, and the palace is reportedly baffled by the request. They're not the only ones. And as if we haven't suffered enough, tonight Netflix released a new trailer for another Harry and Meghan show. This one promises to be just as smug as the first one. Every time I think they can't plummet new depths, these two, they're now comparing themselves to Nelson Mandela, who spent nearly 30 years in a 6x6 prison cell. Really? He went on to become the first black president for South Africa, a unifying leader of true greatness. One of the, well, actually the most impressive person I've ever interviewed in my life. They are comparing their dash for freedom to a mansion in California where they now hawk out their royal titles for hundreds of millions of dollars. That's what Mandela did in their eyes? Well, to me, it's unbelievable. But maybe there are some out there that believe this stuff. Joining me now is the author and activist Natalie Collins, the former head of Royal Protection Di Davis, and TalkTV contributor Esther Cracker. Well, let me start with you, Esther. You've been waiting patiently here. They're the new Mandela, apparently, combined.
I just find the arrogance is incredible to demand an apology, because that's how you get an apology, by demanding one, a sincere and honest and open apology. I just think, you know, they officially declared war on the royal family by coming out with this Netflix documentary. They made it clear that they wanted no reconciliation, because you wouldn't do that. You wouldn't put your family through that if you really wanted open, genuine conversation and reconciliation.
But also, they just called Prince Charles a lying bully. Yeah. They've called Prince William
even worse.
Even worse. So they drove him out of the country with his, or he drove them out of the country with his bullying and lies. They've called the whole family a bunch of racists.
Why would you even want an apology from people like that are so negative in your view?
Well, I think I can understand why they're demanding apology, because they're so self-righteous about everything. They assume they're right about everything. I can't understand what on earth makes them think Charles and William would even consider being in the room with them right now.
But I do think there's an element of the longer that they can keep this feud going, that's more money in their bank account, because now everything they do, they'll just be like, oh, but what about William? How's your relationship with the royal family? How's your relationship with your father? And so it's basically, you know, a giant check that blank check they've signed.
How could you trust them not to just basically record everything that goes on if they did have a meeting like that?
Well, they would.
Let me go to Natalie Collins. Natalie, I'm aware there are people out there that completely disagree and think that they are true freedom fighters who were oppressed by the royal family and have taken their oppression now to this vast mansion in Montecito in Santa Barbara. It's a beautiful place. I've been down to that area. Lovely. Rolling ocean waves, beautiful lifestyle. Not my idea of what oppression looks like, but there we are. Each to their own. But let's get to this idea of an apology, that you can basically call a family a bunch of callous racists who refused to let you get help for suicidal thoughts that you said you had, that made racist comments, apparently, that were so demeaning you had to allude to them on an Oprah Winfrey interview. You now call them a bunch of lying bullies, including the new king. Why would you expect anybody to sit down with you and apologise after you've done all the public trashing?
I think in the context of a column that was written today by Jeremy Clarkson, which described Meghan Markle as worse than Rose Weston and calling on people to have her stripped naked and throw excrement on her in the street, I think it's really important that we put the context of what Meghan and Harry are talking about in the context of the wider hatred, which, to be fair, you were a real pioneer in that hatred of Meghan Markle years ago, years before.
I don't hate Meghan
Jeremy
Markle.
Clarkson wrote
I don't know. Hang on.
I think it's...
Hang on.
Well, I mean, you have made a career out of
You said I hate Meghan
her.
Markle. Let me be clear. I've never said I hate Meghan Markle. I don't hate Meghan Markle. I hate what she's done to the royal family and to the monarchy and to the reputation of Britain. Only tonight, the New York Times has carried a major op-ed piece absolutely trashing this country as a racist country with a racist institution at the head of it, a callous institution that should be dismantled. So, yeah, I see real damage in what Meghan Markle and Harry have both done now to the reputation of his country and to our monarchy. So, yeah, but I don't hate them individually as people. And in relation to the Clarkson column, which he's now issued a mea culpa over, I didn't think he should have put that in the column for my personal view, but he's now said he wishes he hadn't either. So, I don't see what that has to do with the wider picture of these two trashing their families and now demanding an apology.
Well, I think in the same way that you're saying you don't personally hate them, but you are opposed to what they stand for and what they're saying and how they've behaved, I think that's entirely the same argument that Meghan and Harry are making in their documentary and in the work that they've done, is saying that actually the way that they've been harmed by this institution, by this system, which, you know, we cannot deny the impact of colonialism, we cannot deny the impact of this monarchy in terms of we have a history in this country of doing really terrible things to other places, and to deny that reality, to deny the impact of and the reality this monarchy. How is it that in this day and age we have a group of people who are born into wealth and privilege just because of being born into it? It is absolutely
They're
madness
also responsible for developing the Commonwealth.
That is the norm.
They're also responsible for developing the Commonwealth, which has been one of the great success stories in the world. And, of course,
it's not really Commonwealth, though, is it? The people who've got that wealth are mainly in the royal family, have a lot more wealth.
So you hate them because they've got money. So presumably by that yardstick, if you hate people who've got lots of money without actually earning or deserving it, you must also hate, therefore, the Sussexes, who've done nothing to deserve it other than trash their family.
Well, I think, you know, I think there's a sense that, of course, people, we can't, like, hate people because of their privilege, but what they're doing with it or how they're utilising it is really important as well. And I think there is a sense that we are also talking about a man who, as a boy, his mother was killed by a baying mob in the media, and then was,
actually, no, that's not true.
grew
I'm
up
sorry.
to have a wife
I'm sorry.
who was also
look,
attacked by a baying mob.
These are easy lies to say on television, but I'm afraid I have to hold you to account on them.
But it's not a lie that his mother was killed,
Princess Diana was not killed by a baying mob.
It's not a lie.
Princess Diana was killed by a drunk driver. That was the official inquest report into her death. It was a drunk driver speeding who killed Princess Diana. So it wasn't a baying mob that killed her.
Furore.
Well, you might want it to be a baying mob. And maybe Harry has grown up thinking it was a baying mob. I could tell 100 stories about the way his mother colluded with me as a newspaper editor with the paparazzi, or colluded with me over having a private lunch at Kensington Palace, giving me loads of stories, which she knew I would then have as informed information for my newspaper. I could tell the time that Diana rang me up and gave me an hour-long interview about a visit to a clinic she'd done, signed off on every page of the interview, which was faxed to her and returned with her initials on it, and the next day said she was outraged by the intrusive story in the Daily Mirror, which was the story she'd given me at length over an hour on tape. So there are lots of different ways you can skin this cat about the relationship between the royal family and the media. My argument about Meghan and Harry is they apparently were so disgusted by this callous, racist family and institution that they fled the country, gave up royal duty, now live in California in extreme luxury, and yet, bizarrely, they still want to retain the titles afforded them by the institution that they describe as callous racist. And